continues. Libyan rebels battle with Gaddafi loyalists for control of Bani Walid as a deadline for a peaceful surrender draws to an end. Strong words. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemns the storming of the embassy in Cairo as a blatant violation of international norms. Deadly sinking. An overcrowded ferry sinks in the sea off Tanzania's mainland with about 370 people dead or missing. And precautionary measures. The U.S. steps up security after receiving evidence of a possible terror threat for the 10th anniversary of 9/11 2001 attacks. Hello and welcome to CCTV News. I'm Chang Jun in Beijing. Libyan rebel forces are battling with Gaddafi loyalists for control of the desert town of Bani Walid, one of Gaddafi's last remaining strongholds, as a deadline for a peaceful surrender draws to an end. NATO warplanes have carried out at least 5 airstrikes on loyalist positions in coordination with the rebels' assaults. The attacks have met heavy resistance from loyalist forces. The rebels' chief negotiator, Abdullah Kanshir, describes the town as very, very well protected. The main fighting is taking place in the valley of Wadi Dinar, less than 2 kilometers from the main gates of Bani Walid. Loyalists fired grad rockets and mortars, and snipers fired on the rebel fighters trying to force their way into Bani Walid, killing at least 2. Now, for more information on Libya, we are joined by our correspondent Stephanie Freed, who is in Bani Walid. Stephanie, the deadline for loyalists in Bani Walid to surrender peacefully was set for tonight, but the attack came earlier. Can you tell us why?
Well, essentially, it started yesterday. The deadline, yes, indeed, was for tonight. But as the chief negotiator and certainly the head of the NCC said, that they maintained the right to go ahead and hit Bani Walid early, and that's because people there were refusing to lay down arms. They were not. The NCC says they were not willing to negotiate, and so yesterday they started to go in, and today has been a very fierce day. We've been outside. We've been just at the entrance on the front line of Bani Walid, and it has been a day of fighting indeed, and they're not stopping here, meeting with quite a bit of resistance from inside Bani Walid. And so, yes, they did preempt that deadline, some say because just basically to employ the element of surprise.
Right. And Stephanie, earlier the NTC said it hoped for a peaceful resolution in Bani Walid. Can you tell us how the fighting went on the ground?
Well, it doesn't look like any sort of peaceful resolution is going to be happening here anytime soon. It's pretty, it's quite a battle. It's a bitter battle happening here. We got caught, as I said, in the crossfire with mortar and incoming shells, and on the front line, I think that the opposition forces were hit harder than they really expected to get hit. We certainly saw that. Then we saw the NATO planes coming in. We saw them, or the after effect. We could hear and we could see the smoke coming up as NATO was hitting Bani Walid. What's interesting is that minutes prior, we were right there on the front talking to some soldiers. They were saying, they were joking, oh, by lunchtime we'll be going in and we'll be having lunch in the center of Bani Walid. Well, that certainly didn't happen, and what we did see were opposition fighters being brought out in ambulances. We saw several wounded, and one person that we did see died minutes later. So this is not going to be an easy fight, and there's not going to be a peaceful resolution here.
Thank you very much. That's our correspondent Stephanie Freed in Bani Walid. Now, staying in Libya, the country has resumed operations at its major Zawiya oil refinery near the capital Tripoli, and plans to begin shipping oil abroad once more by the end of the month. CCTV correspondent Jack Barton reports that while it may take some time for the country's production to return to full capacity, most of its oil and gas infrastructure has survived the war intact.
Libyan rebels inspect damage to gas-filling equipment in Tripoli.
This was the new system. We used it to refill gas. It belonged to the Brega Oil and Gas Company. We brought it here to be useful to the people. But the army later destroyed it. These over there are the fragments of the bomb.
Next to a storage facility, the damage caused by a Gaddafi force's grad rocket is clear to see. It was a near miss. The rebel government estimates between 10 to 20% of the country's energy infrastructure has been damaged, but says most of it is minor and easy to fix. Some major companies say their facilities have survived completely intact.
We shut down, we stopped everything, but infrastructure still exists. No damage at all in our in Zwitina company. None of the facilities been damaged or destroyed.
Ahmed Swayze says it will not take long for his company to operate at full capacity once more.
No, not years, months. Months we can start full capacity of Zwitina operation.
Pre-war capacity for Libya was 1.6 million barrels of oil a day. 2 eastern fields sabotaged by Gaddafi forces early in the war are expected to be back online by the end of the month, pumping 250,000 barrels a day to the port of Tobruk. Smaller offshore fields should also be back online soon. Libya formerly exported 3/4 of its oil, and at today's prices it would earn the country about $4 billion a month. With oil returning, the country's fuel queues are easing. But they're still up to half a kilometre long, down from more than a kilometre a month ago. Foreign oil companies are more cautious, warning full production will probably take more than a year to achieve. But even half capacity would still mean about 800,000 barrels of oil a day by the end of the year.
Somewhere down the road, that's going to be good news, not just for Libya, but for the oil-hungry international community. In the meanwhile, these drivers are going to have to wait hours for overpriced fuel for weeks, if not many months to come. Jack Barton, CCTV, Tripoli.
In other news, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the storming of the Israeli embassy in Cairo and the violence that followed. According to an aide to the Prime Minister, Netanyahu denounced the incident as a blatant violation of international norms. The Egyptian Health Ministry says 3 people have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded in clashes between protesters and police. Matt Studdard has more.
The aide, who spoke on condition of anonymity, says Netanyahu thanked the Egyptian authorities for helping rescue 6 Israeli employees trapped inside the building. But the Prime Minister says the incident has damaged the fabric of peace between the 2 countries. Israel flew its ambassador home on Saturday after protesters stormed the embassy, hurling documents and the Israeli flag from windows.
We demand that the Israeli ambassador not come back to Egypt again. This is our country, and these people have hated us for ages. All we want is that he doesn't come back.
Police fired shots into the air and tear gas to disperse the crowd. A heavy security presence is now being maintained. The protest began on Friday when the wall of the embassy compound was torn down after a demonstration in Tahrir Square calling for speedier reforms. The wall was erected after 5 Egyptian border guards were accidentally killed by the Israeli army last month. There have been several smaller protests near the embassy since then. Egypt made peace with Israel in 1979. Since then, the 2 countries have experienced a smooth relationship for several decades, until earlier this year when anti-government protests brought down President Hosni Mubarak's regime. Matt Stuttard, CCTV.
Egypt's Supreme Council of the Armed Forces and the Prime Minister have held a meeting on the current situation. Earlier, our correspondent Adel Al-Marouki told us more about the meeting in the Egyptian capital.
Well, the meeting has ended, and there has been an official announcement from the meeting that had both the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces and the Egyptian cabinet, including the Prime Minister, the Minister of Interior, and the Minister of Information. And briefly, let me tell you just a few points of what they said. They said that what happened cannot be tolerated, and they confirmed that Egypt is giving all its respect and commitment to all international obligations. They also said that Egypt is responsible for securing all foreign missions in Egypt. and at the same time they had they caught about 38 from the people who were involved in yesterday's incidents, and they sent them to an exceptional or a special court. You know that last Friday one of the main calls was to cancel all military courts for civilians. So they reached something like a middle between the regular court and a military court, creating such an exceptional court. He said they described that people and protesters abused the reference of the Central Security Forces from using violence against them, and they confirmed that they will take in the future all possible and legal measures to maintain security in the country. They also announced the activation of the emergency law once again, which was one of the demands that yesterday's protest in Tahrir Square wanted to cancel the emergency law. However, it seemed that they find the situation in Egypt quite difficult, and they have to do such measures once again.
Still ahead on CCTV News, deadly sinking. An overcrowded ferry sinks in the sea off Tanzania's mainland with about 370 people dead or missing. And precautionary measures, the U.S. steps up security after receiving evidence of a possible terror threat for the 10th anniversary of 9/11-2001 attacks. An overcrowded ferry has sunk in the sea of Tanzania's mainland. About 600 people were on board, and approximately 370 people are dead or missing. The ship was traveling from Zanzibar to Pemba when it capsized at Nungwi, an area with heavy currents in the deep sea between mainland Tanzania and Pemba Island. The accident is the worst of its kind in the history of Zanzibar. Rescue operations are currently underway. According to local officials, so far about 230 people have been rescued and 40 bodies found. Overloading and technical errors are suspected to be the cause of the accident. Now let's turn to Hunan province in central South China. On September 9th, a ferry boat sank in Fui River near Shaoyang City at 3 p.m. The accident killed 11 and injured 16, with another 3 passengers still missing. And the local authorities are still searching after over 24 hours. Wang Xinye tells us about how this tragedy occurred.
Though hope is slim, locals have not stopped trying. The ferry boat, designed to carry a maximum of 14, had 45 people on board before the accident. Most of the deceased were students from primary and middle schools around the county. They were returning home for the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival, a traditional Chinese holiday for family reunions. Yet, the accident has separated the families from their children forever. 16 survivors are currently recovering at the People's Hospital in Shaoyang City, with fear hovering in their minds.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning. How come you are still awake?
I am tired, but I'm so scared. I'll definitely have nightmares.
What happened at that time?
My brother and I were on board, and it was like the boat had hit something. Soon water flooded in. We struggled inside the cabin in vain, and within about 20 seconds, the boat sank. I've no idea how my brother and I survived.
Though traumatized by the accident, the patients are in good health condition.
The health conditions are largely stable, although the risk of respiratory infection exists as they choke on water. We'll put them under observation for 72 hours. They can leave the hospital after passing some health checks.
The local authorities says the propeller of the ferry boat was entangled with iron cables used for a broken dredger anchored in the river. Failing to switch off the engine, the 2 owners of the vessel also grossly overloaded it, causing the boat to sink. They are now in police custody. Although punishment will fall on them, lives can never be brought back. While others are preparing for the reunion festival coming in 2 days, these sorrow-filled families have only tears waiting ahead. Wang Xinye, CCTV.
Let's turn our focus to the heated debate in the U.S. over a potential arms sale deal to Taiwan. The controversial deal includes 66 late-model F-16 aircraft with a potential value of over $8 billion. The Obama administration is expected to announce a final decision of the arms sale on October 1st. Li Ke-fu has the details.
Another move to export weapons. 45 U.S. senators and 181 members of the U.S. House of Representatives have signed letters calling on U.S. President Barack Obama to approve the arms sale to Taiwan. The potential deal, one of the largest of its kind, includes 66 F-16 fighter jets. The F-16 is considered one of the world's most